Pilot Podcasts. A medieval philosopher just solved your biggest problem with fake news, conspiracy theories, and overconfident experts. Today, we're diving into the Codex Veritatis, a philosophical system that turns I don't know into the most powerful tool for finding truth. You'll learn how ancient wisdom meets cutting-edge information theory, why admitting ignorance makes you smarter, and how to build a personal framework for navigating our post-truth world. Let me bring in someone who's been studying this fascinating intersection of old and new approaches to knowledge.
So the Codex Veritatis starts with something that sounds almost absurd. Doctrine number 1 is literally, I don't know. But this isn't just throwing your hands up in defeat. It's what they call docta ignorantia, learned ignorance. The idea is that true knowledge begins when you recognize the limits of what you actually know.
Wait, so this is basically saying ignorance is a good thing?
Not ignorance as in being uninformed, but ignorance as in being aware of what you don't know. Think about it. When was the last time you heard someone in a heated argument say, you know what, I might be wrong about this?
Basically never. Everyone's an expert on everything these days.
Exactly. And that's where this gets really interesting. The Codex traces this concept back to Socrates, I know that I know nothing, and then to Nicholas of Cusa in the 15th century, who developed this whole theory of learned ignorance. But what makes the Codex unique is it formalizes this into an actual system with axioms and mathematical structures.
Hold on, mathematical structures? How do you mathematically represent not knowing something?
This is where it gets wild. They use information theory, the stuff Claude Shannon developed for telecommunications. The system defines something called information variables that can measure uncertainty, entropy, the reliability of knowledge sources. It's like having a GPS for truth.
A GPS for truth. I love that metaphor.
Right? And just like GPS tells you when you're off course, this system has what they call the Codex Pathologiae, basically a diagnostic manual for all the ways our thinking goes wrong. Cognitive biases, logical fallacies, information overload.
So it's like having a user manual for your own brain?
That's actually a perfect way to put it. The system categorizes epistemic pathologies into 5 types: cognitive, logical, informational, methodological, and social. So like, confirmation bias would be cognitive, while groupthink would be social.
This is starting to sound incredibly practical. But let's back up. What exactly are these axioms you mentioned?
The axioms are like the fundamental rules of the game. There's the axiom of limited knowledge, basically. Every person has boundaries to what they can know. The axiom of verification, truth claims need to be checkable. And the axiom of coherence, your beliefs should logically fit together.
Those sound almost obvious when you say them like that.
Right? But think about how often people violate these in practice. How many times have you seen someone make a claim they can't possibly verify or hold contradictory beliefs without even realizing it?
Daily, especially on social media.
Exactly. And this is where the Geometria Veritatis comes in, the geometry of truth. It's this method where you map out knowledge like a geometric space, so you can actually see the relationships between different ideas, spot contradictions, identify gaps.
Wait, you're literally drawing maps of what you know and don't know?
In a sense, yes. Think of it like this. If knowledge is a landscape, most people are wandering around in the fog. This system gives you tools to map the terrain, mark the dangerous areas, and identify the solid ground.
That's such a powerful image. But I'm curious about the historical connection. You mentioned Nicholas of Cusa. What was his deal?
Cusa was this brilliant 15th century cardinal who basically said, human reason can never fully grasp absolute truth. But instead of being depressing, he found this liberating. It meant you could keep learning, keep questioning, never get stuck in dogma.
So he was like the original growth mindset guy?
Ha! Yeah, you could say that. But what's fascinating is how this connects to modern psychology. The Codex talks about epistemic humility and the beginner's mind, concepts that show up in everything from Zen Buddhism to cognitive behavioral therapy.
It's like this ancient wisdom keeps getting rediscovered by different fields.
Exactly. And the Codex tries to synthesize all of this. It takes the apophatic tradition from Platonism, that's the idea that you can only approach truth by saying what it's not, and combines it with modern information theory and cognitive science.
Apophatic, that's a new word for me. Can you break that down?
Apophatic comes from Greek meaning to deny. It's the idea that some truths are so complex or transcendent that you can only approach them by eliminating what they're not. Like, you can't directly define consciousness, but you can rule out what it isn't.
So it's like sculpting. You remove everything that isn't the statue?
Perfect analogy. And that's exactly what doctrine number 1 does. By starting with I don't know, you're clearing away all the false certainties, the assumptions, the biases that cloud your thinking.
This is making me think about how we handle disagreements. Like, what if instead of arguing about who's right, we started by acknowledging what we don't know?
Now you're getting to the ethical implications. The Codex argues that epistemic humility isn't just about better thinking, it's about better relationships. When you admit you might be wrong, it opens space for actual dialogue instead of just competing monologues.
That's huge, especially in our current political climate.
Right. And the system has practical applications too. In science, it encourages constant hypothesis revision. In everyday life, it helps you develop critical thinking skills. In social situations, it reduces groupthink and manipulation.
But doesn't this lead to paralysis? Like, if you're always questioning everything, how do you ever make decisions?
Great question. The Codex distinguishes between practical certainty and absolute certainty. You can act on the best available evidence while still remaining open to new information. It's about calibrating your confidence to the strength of your evidence.
So it's not about being wishy-washy, it's about being appropriately confident?
Exactly. And this is where the verification procedures come in. The system outlines different types of verification: empirical, logical, formal. It's like having a toolkit for checking your work.
This reminds me of the scientific method, but applied to everything.
That's a really good parallel. But the Codex goes further by acknowledging the limits of verification itself. It references the Gettier problem, where you can have justified true belief that still isn't really knowledge because it's based on luck.
I'm not familiar with that one.
So imagine you believe your friend owns a Ford because you've seen him driving one. You form the belief someone in this room owns a Ford. Turns out your friend doesn't own it, he was just borrowing it. But coincidentally, another person in the room does own a Ford. Your belief was true and justified, but was it really knowledge?
Whoa. That's like being right for the wrong reasons.
Exactly. And the Codex addresses this by emphasizing reliable cognitive processes, not just true conclusions. It's about how you arrive at beliefs, not just whether they happen to be correct.
This is getting pretty deep. But I'm wondering, how do you actually implement this in real life? Like, what would it look like to live by these principles?
The Codex suggests starting with what they call tracking your personal inflation rate for truth. Pick beliefs you hold strongly and regularly examine the evidence for them. Notice when you're making claims you can't verify. Practice saying, I don't know, when you actually don't know.
That last one sounds harder than it should be.
It really is. We're socially conditioned to have opinions about everything. But the Codex argues that intellectual honesty, admitting ignorance, is actually a form of strength, not weakness.
It's like the difference between fake confidence and real confidence.
Perfect way to put it. Real confidence comes from knowing the limits of your knowledge and being comfortable with uncertainty. Fake confidence comes from pretending you know more than you do.
And in our information age, that distinction seems more important than ever.
Absolutely. The Codex was written for exactly this moment, when we're drowning in information but starving for wisdom. When everyone's an expert, but nobody wants to admit they might be wrong.
So what would happen if more people adopted this approach? Like, what would society look like?
The Codex suggests it would lead to more productive disagreements, better decision-making, reduced polarization. When people start from, I might be wrong, they're more likely to actually listen to each other.
That sounds almost utopian.
Maybe, but even small steps matter. The system isn't about perfection, it's about progress. About building better habits of mind, one I don't know at a time.
You know what strikes me about all this? It's simultaneously ancient and cutting edge. Like Socrates meets Silicon Valley.
That's exactly what makes it so powerful. The Codex shows that some insights about human nature and knowledge are timeless, but they can be enhanced and formalized using modern tools. It's tradition and innovation working together.
And maybe that's what we need right now, not choosing between old wisdom and new methods, but finding ways to combine them.
Exactly. The Codex Veritatis isn't just an academic exercise, it's a practical framework for navigating complexity, uncertainty, and disagreement with both humility and rigor.
So, when you step back from all this, what's the big takeaway? How does embracing I don't know actually make us smarter?
Because it forces you to be honest about the quality of your evidence, to stay curious instead of defensive, and to build knowledge systematically rather than just accumulating opinions. It turns ignorance from a liability into an asset.
And in a world full of fake experts and false certainties, that kind of intellectual honesty becomes a superpower.
Exactly. The Codex gives you tools to cut through the noise, to distinguish reliable knowledge from mere opinion, and to engage with complex issues without falling into the trap of oversimplification.
Here's what I want you to try this week. Next time you're in a discussion and feel the urge to be right, pause and ask yourself, what don't I know about this? What assumptions am I making? What evidence would change my mind? Those 3 questions, inspired by centuries of philosophical wisdom, might just transform how you think about truth itself. Thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts.